Welcome to the S.J. Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Hi, thanks for joining the S.J. Child Show today. I am here with Geoffrey Wells. Geoffrey.
Jeffrey, yeah.
Feels like I
Hello.
want to be like English with you or something. So where are you calling in from today? Or I guess videoing in?
From Long Island.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm over in Salt Lake City, Utah, and it's a brisk, chilly day here and ready for spring.
My parents lived there for many years.
Really?
In Salt Lake
So
City,
you were familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very beautiful place. It has beautiful seasons and especially if you're an outdoors, person and everything. So fantastic.
Did a lot of skiing in Utah.
A lot of skiing. I used to ski when I was younger, but I haven't since I've had kids and have been an adult, darn it. Now it seems like, it'd be so overwhelming and so expensive probably.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way it goes? It's so nice to have you here today. I'm excited to talk to you about your books and your passion writing and kind of learn more about where that came from and get to know you. So give us a brief introduction of who you are and kind of what brought you here today.
Terrific. My name is Geoffrey Wells. I'm an author. I have written 3 thrillers and 1 middle grade thriller as well. I grew up in South Africa, came here in 1980, and had a life in the corporate America, where I was vice president in broadcasting for both ABC and then later on at the Fox television stations.
Wow.
So when I was, I'd been writing my first novel in the last 10 years before I left. And when I was ready to publish it, I said, that's it. I'm out of here. I want to write full time. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
A writer's life it shall be. I love that. I can kind of see you just kind of taking the next step. That's so fascinating. As a child, do you remember was this something you'd always wanted to do, or what kind of books did you read then, and what maybe turned you on to the thriller genre?
Well, as a child, my dad was an academic, but he was in the field of mining engineering, which doesn't sound terribly literary. However, he had a love of literature, and he read to us from the classics. So, we had an old-fashioned family where we all sat around the dining room table, and we lived on a farm. And I remember him reading, Swiss Family Robinson, and just 300 Leagues Under the Sea, and all of these great classics. And he would break down the sentences for us. He'd say, now that word was used because of this, and I loved that. He understood the etymology of the words, and it was very infectious, and so that stayed with me. So I was a young reader, through high school, and I was always reading up, several grades ahead of where I should have been reading. But I loved that because it sort of gave me a vicarious thrill that I was doing something naughty, and but I was basically reading the books that my parents were reading, and so now, when you read about agents talking about what young kids are reading, or especially young teenagers and middle school kids, they're saying, don't be too precious about what you write about. They want the adventure. They want the thrill. And so I bore that in mind when I wrote Nevertheless. As far as thriller is concerned, I also loved John le Carré. One of my first experiences with reading spy thrillers, and I loved the concept of the man who came in from the cold and etc. So that was thrilling to me, and I found an excuse to write about that in my first novel.
I love that. I think when you have those childhood experiences, they can grow and nurture so much within you, and you're so lucky as a human to be taking advantage of that childhood kind of love. And because I think that when we put ourselves in those excuse me experiences, it also makes us feel younger and kind of re-experience that love of what it was like.
Yeah. You're transported to a different world, and that's what I loved as a kid. I could find myself on an island somewhere and be shipwrecked, and go in great danger to all these places through the pages of a book without ever having to risk it myself. So it was vicarious thrill.
Yeah, absolutely. And when did you have the idea then to create it for middle schoolers as well? I think that was a fantastic idea, because I remember that was about probably elementary school, late elementary, early middle school was that same genre for me, that detective. I mean, I think at my time, James Patterson was just coming out, and I
Sure.
had
Sure.
25 James Patterson books. And I just was always, solving the murder mystery. And it's such
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
arousal of excitement.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So
Who, when did so when did that start for you to think, oh, maybe I should do this? And
after
how did you
sure
take that and switch?
after I'd written my 3 thrillers, I I I had no intention of writing a middle grade book, but my editor at the time said my protagonist for the same story was an elderly gentleman in his 80s, and he was observing 2 kids, and she said, "You really should write it from the kids' point of view." And I said, "I have no experience with that. I wouldn't know where to begin." So she said, "Yeah, you do. Just write it." So,
You were a kid.
yeah. So I rewrote the draft, um, and it really was prompted by the fact that we had this tragedy where I live in my town. We had 3 overdose victims die from fentanyl,
Mm,
and I thought, wow, it's so tragic that the adults died. The kids who have to watch a parent, you know, die as a result of taking these pills is incomprehensible.
yeah.
And how must they feel? And I thought, in order to write a story that would empower them and not frighten them to death, um, I want to turn it into where they have the upper hand over impossible odds. And so that's what I did. You have these 2 kids on opposite side of the social spectrum, one privileged, the other one a Latino dreamer kid, who bond over playing soccer, and they discover a tunnel which leads to a mill where the drugs are being smuggled in to Long Island,
Mm.
and one thing leads to another, and they get caught up, uh, at times running for their lives, and at other times outsmarting the bad guys. And so I made it into an adventure, and helping kids understand that confronting your fears is much more healthy than running away from them.
Isn't that true? What kind of feedback have you gotten about that book?
Well, I've gotten wonderful reviews from terrific sources. The reviews that I have on Amazon are, they're good, but it's not as many as I want.
Yeah,
And I think it's kind of a scary subject. So I kind of understand that, and that's why I'm doing a lot of podcasting and
yeah,
guesting, and to see if I can get the word out about that book.
absolutely. And I agree. And I think that when we can put real life, excuse me, situations into books, and especially middle school, where, I mean, I know that schools would probably be leery of wanting the content, but that's what they need. They need realistic life, like coincidence, or excuse me, consequences to understand, so that when and if and hopefully they don't ever have to come up against those situations, but if they do, they have a tiny bit of knowledge to see, okay, I remember this situation in which they took this choice next or made this step. So I think that that's brilliant to kind of put those issues in the forefront, even though, yeah, people don't want to look at those things, and
Yeah.
that's tricky.
It's a tough subject.
Yeah, I think I faced that same stigma. I mean, I had children's books about special needs 10, 7, 8 years ago now, and it was still like, no, we don't, that's not, that's not what people are looking for, but that's what they need to know about. They need to know
Yeah.
how to be in society and live with people, and we all need knowledge of how to do those things. And that exactly what you have written about in that book is so valuable for young adults to start to see those consequences and be able to make their own better choices.
Yeah, and it's once you get through understanding the approach of the book, it's easy for these kids to wrap their heads around what's really going on, and that is basically to save their dads.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these two 12-year-olds, whose mission in life is to not turn their dads into overdose victims and save them from the pills. And so that's their motivation, and that's what they go about trying to solve. And
Wow. Well, let's back up and backwards. We went forward and talk about the first three books. And you said that you'd been working on it for a decade before you decided to do that. I know exactly how that what that looks like.
yeah,
Even though my books are very small, I still have so many of them that I still need to get out there someday. But I think the process is really amazing. What So let's talk about the first book. What's that one?
So a fado for the river. A fado is a Portuguese ballad, and it's about nostalgia and regret.
Mm.
And it's well established in Portuguese culture. Now, when I was growing up in South Africa, our neighboring country was Mozambique, which was a Portuguese colony. And when I was at university, me and a friend drove there to have some fun. And we stayed in the shipping offices because his dad was with the bank that partially funded the shipping. And there was a young secretary there who I had a crush on. And nothing ever happened. But I thought that is such a great platform, for a story, because you have these two naive boys who get to know her, and they realize that she has a secret that three warring factions, this was 1 year before the revolution in Mozambique, all wanted. And that was, what is the name and time of arrival of the ship carrying guns into Mozambique? They all needed the ammunition and they all needed the arms. And that was a true historical fact. There was the Portuguese government, there was the Portuguese army who were ready to overthrow the government. And then there were the indigenous people who were fighting for their self-determination. And they all were on the verge of war. And of course, war happened, and 16 years, 1 million deaths later, it was just hell. But these kids decided she needed to get out of the country because she was not going to survive. And I don't want to make too much of a long story of it, but that was that story. And he sets about, it catches up with him later in life when he's blackmailed and accused of murdering her. And of course, he didn't murder her. He helped her escape by faking her murder.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And so he had to prove that he didn't murder her. And he tracks her down and realizes that she was a heroine of the revolution and saved millions of lives because of what she did. So it's one of those, one of those stories.
You know, how much cultural ideas you were able to gain from being in different parts of the world and seeing all that and adding them to your stories. I think that's just, it's fascinating. I have a love of geography, so I love to learn about other places and hear stories about them and envision what it's like and things. I think that makes it really magical and relatable to several different types of audiences. So what did that look like, the next book? How did you decide, okay, well, this, is it like a second to the first, or is it completely different?
It's somewhat related because the story, Atone for the Ivory Cloud, the Ivory Cloud is where elephant ivory is traded illegally, and it's traded through the internet. And the atonement that needed to happen was the fact that we're all somehow complicit in elephant ivory because we use ivory. Our culture, a lot of our culture is based on ivory in the sense that we go to piano concerts. Those piano keys were made from ivory. You know, people never really realized that, but elephants were dying for every keyboard that was played on. And so, you know, the elephants were being decimated. So what I do in that story is I take a New York composer, just graduated from Juilliard, you know, at the top of her career, and she does a lot of online collaboration with musicians. And she loses her phone in Central Park. And 2 weeks later, the FBI knock on her door and they say, "We have your phone, but we have to tell you that your website is being used by cybercrime syndicate to trade African ivory." And she goes, "What? I don't know what, I have absolutely nothing to do with it. I know nothing about it." And they say, "Yeah, we know that because that's exactly why they're using your site, because they can hide behind it. And it's a front for them." And so she gets involved. She gets pulled into a mission to bring down these warlords in Africa, and it's extremely dangerous. And she gets teamed up with a Tanzanian street vendor who also has information about the marketplaces and trading. And so I wrote about that and how she goes back to Africa with him. And it's an adventure that turns the pages.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I was just thinking, I'm going to re-listen to this and be told stories over and over again. That's fantastic. Have you done your books on Audible or just in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I am about to embark on that project. I have not done it yet, and I'm looking forward to getting into that.
I think that they will be definitely road trip listeners for sure. It sounds like something I would definitely want to be listening to. And you know, I loved to read my whole life. I loved to write, but I really don't enjoy just like book reading as much as I used to, but I do love to listen to when I can. And I guess that you just kind of go with where your best learning style will take you
Yeah,
sometimes.
which media lends itself to the way you learn, right?
Yeah, and it's so nice that they have so many things available
Yeah.
these days.
And I heard from more and more authors that they make more money from their audiobooks than they from their printed books.
Oh, wonderful.
So
Wow.
I'm definitely going to check it out. I've been slow because I've been intimidated, frankly, about getting in, doing it,
Yeah.
and I've been writing books. So
Absolutely.
but
Well,
I do intend to do that.
and are you going to read it yourself or hire someone? I mean, you have a wonderful voice for that. And I guess you would really know how to put all of the right emphasis into it.
I'm just not a performer. I'm just not. I just don't think I could pull off those lines.
Oh, okay.
Like
Well,
these professional readers are so wonderful.
yeah.
And I'd rather work with a producer who finds the right voices.
I love that.
But yeah, my books, that's one of the characteristics of what I do. You open a Geoffrey Wells book, you are going to go to strange, exotic places and find out things you never knew before, because there's a pretty good chance you
Yeah.
wouldn't have come into contact with that sort of information.
Exactly. That's why I love that you're bringing all of these life experiences, yet using your imagination so wonderfully as well and creatively to create the books. And it's fascinating. Tell us about the third. There's one more, right?
There's one more, yeah. So the third one is called The Drowning Bay, which is an ecological thriller, and it's about somebody who was convicted to prison for 1 year, and on her release, she's on parole, and she has to be under family care for the period where she's in parole or on parole, and so her mother's passed away, and her father, with whom she lived, has moved out of the city to Long Island, to the wine country, and bought a vineyard. But the house is not ready, so she checks into an Airbnb, and the hostess of the Airbnb is missing. And there's a young black boy, who's a refugee from Mozambique, and through his giving away the password to her blog, he reads an unpublished blog from her saying that she's going to leave the family and she's going to do what she needs to do, even if it means she'll never see her family again. And that is, she's going to stop the development from ruining the bay and killing the eelgrass that is, that is the food and the environment where all the shellfish and the finfish spawn, and without that, they'll be decimated. Mm-hmm. And so she said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you find your mother. But she's on parole. And if she steps out of line even slightly, she'll go straight back to prison. So it's tremendous risk personally for her. And they work it out. And it's an adventure tracking her down.
What kind of research did you have to do to have all of that knowledge for that book? And maybe some of the others.
That particular book, I had experience with oyster farming. Mm. So in this part of the world, you can sign yourself up to with a marine program through Cornell, and you can farm oysters. And I learned a lot about the bay and its vulnerability, and the heating, and the water heating up, and the algae blooms that cause the detoxification or the deoxygenation of the water, called hypoxia.
Yeah.
And I came across a particular type called Alexandrium, which can be fatal to humans. And then the more I looked into it, what I did was I wrote to the FBI because
Oh, wow.
I knew through attending a conference with the Thriller Writers Association. I did a 1-day course with them. And they said, if you have a book and you want information on what we do, just write to us. We have
Wow.
we have a public affairs division, and they will address your question. That's what I did. And to my complete amazement, they said, yeah, we'd love to help you.
That's
And
so neat.
I said, well, is it conceivable that a bad guy could use Alexandrium? And they said, guess what? Alexandrium is actually a weapon of mass destruction in
Wow.
with the US government. It is actually classified, and it's never been used, but it is so toxic that it has been potentially turned into a weapon. And
That
whether
is so
potentially meant actually, I'll never know. But
yeah.
but
Hope not.
but yeah, so that's
Wow.
what the bad guys were planning, causing deliberate deaths in the wetlands and pointing to, all sorts of bad sanitation and that sort of thing. And it really wasn't. It was deliberate murder. And the boy and this ex-con figure it out. And so that research was through the FBI and it was through Cornell's, the SPAT, what they call the SPAT program. And there's a lot of research in that book, and it's all pretty accurate.
That's amazing. Well, let's give listeners maybe some tips on writing and how maybe your top 3 tips that you would give somebody that's interested in becoming a writer and really putting their ideas and thoughts down onto paper, or however it works best for them, right? Transcription, whatever it is.
Sure. Well, I'm a big believer in reading craft books. And one of the best that I've ever read is more about the methodology you use to develop a story. And it's written by an author by the name of Lisa Kron, Cron, who wrote a book called Story Genius. And what she explains is, if you follow this procedure, you're not going to waste hundreds of thousands of words that go nowhere. You're going to have a story. And if you refine your craft and you execute it the way she recommends, it's going to be publishable. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is you got to write almost every day. It's one of those things where you need like 14,000 hours of practice before you get good at it.
Wow.
And that's true with writing. The more you write, the better you get at it, and the more you hone your craft, the more concise and accurate your writing is. I'm sure you know this with the books that you've written.
They've just 7. I have 7 children's books on.
Yeah.
They're basically poetry, which was my, easy way to express my words when I was doing it, and kind of because they're children's books, making them accessible to them, and rhyming also has such deep learning ability from from rhyming, and so I wanted to kind of add that for early learners and readers and make it fun for them, and so I think that we really I never intended for my books to be for an audience other than my neighbors and maybe the kids or the other students at my kids' schools, because I wanted them to understand why my autistic son acted differently than they did, or why my dyslexic, other child was having a hard time, excuse me, in different ways than other children around them. And I think that just one of our quotes that we love to say is, a little bit of knowledge will turn fear into understanding. And for children, that's so important, because you want them to support and to understand, because that fear comes out of confusion, of not understanding
Yep.
why someone is different. And so give them all the tools that you can give them early on.
Yeah, that's very true. The week before last, I was speaking at a school and talking about nevertheless. And I was explaining to them why or how to get to being authentic, because that's such a buzzword. People talk about, oh, everything you do has to be authentic. But very few definitions exist that really explain how you get to become authentic. And what I explained to the kids is that it starts with resiliency. Kids have to be resilient, and if you consider being resilient as the enemy and run away from it, you're not going to grow. So learning to be resilient is a good thing, and it leads to being more courageous, because the more you do it and the more knocks you take and the more you learn from those lessons, the better off you are. And then I say, and then you've got to go to the next step. Once you have the courage, you have to build the inner home. And what is an inner home? It's like building a house. You start with the foundation, and that's the plot. And then you go to the windows and the doors, and those are the characters. And those are the people that come in and go and look through and look around. And there's the infrastructure of a house, the plumbing and the electricity. And that's the editing and the proofreading and the care that you take with the sentences. And it's the same with building a house. Now, a house is not a home. A home is a structure that you're emotionally attached to it. So once you decide to put all of those things that are precious to you, including your own privacy, into your inner home, you will have the strength to not take drugs, to be your own person, to think independently. And when I sign the books, I always write in the book, build your inner home.
I love that. That's a wonderful message. I think that that's really inspiring, and especially, kids have. I've gone to some schools and done some, author things too, and the kids look up to you so much. It's like you're this little mini celebrity that's there, especially the younger ones, and but that mentorship that you can take that role of to help kids, especially, middle school is like the hardest years, I think, of everyone's lifetimes, right? And so I think it's really important that we have wonderful stories to draw from, wonderful experiences to learn from, but also, like you said, I love that you're teaching how to build authenticity, because we can say it all day long, but if kids don't know how to achieve something, that it's just this fancy word that's been thrown around, then they won't grow, and they won't have that success and availability to do so. You had also mentioned that you took a class. I think that that's a wonderful idea for people that are, maybe interested. What kind of classes do you recommend for people who want to get started?
Well, some universities have classes for adults who want to write. I was listening to your podcast with Raina Jensen, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, where she was talking about, doing classes at colleges and that sort of thing. But a lot of writers also belong to writing groups, where she can workshop, or I can workshop my books. I actually belong to the Romance Writers of America chapter on Long Island. Now, I don't write romance.
Yeah.
But those writers, many of them are bestsellers, and they're extremely experienced, and they know exactly what they're doing. And I've learned so much from them, and they're very generous people.
Yeah.
And so, it's just a privilege to belong to that group. And so, you get guidance. And with me being a male writer, I can always use the guidance on how to better hone emotionally charged scenes, and that's what
Yeah,
romance does in a very good way. So,
I like
I've
that.
gotten a lot of value out of it.
Those are some really great ways to get perspectives so that you can have a correct perspective to write from when writing about a character that's not like yourself. So I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
that's a great idea. And there's so many things, YouTube has so many
So many.
videos you can watch if
Oh
that
yeah,
is easier for you, or just the internet has is everything right at your fingertips,
yeah,
bad and good.
yeah,
And so I think that taking advantage of all of those tools you have is a wonderful way to start. But
yeah.
really having that passion within you to tell your story. There was another gentleman that you'd probably like his show too. I think his name was Danny. Oh, it's right there. Dang it. I'm gonna have to get the last name and send it to you. But he also had said kind of at the end, like, if you've written a story, it's your duty to share it with the world. It's the only perspective the world's ever gonna see.
Yeah,
Your perspective is different than anyone else's.
yeah. I think you have an obligation to get your thinking out there, which
Yeah.
is why you need to take your writing seriously. It's not a game,
Yeah.
It's a message, and it can impact on people. And
Yeah.
that's why I decided, after a career of doing technical work, that if I was going to say something, it better have some significance and some meaning, because I'm not going to waste my time writing frivolous nonsense.
Yeah,
I'm going to try and write
exactly.
something. I'm going to try and write something that has some meaning.
Oh, they sound amazing, and um, a lot of value and a lot of just incredible experiences from other cultures and
Mm.
different areas of the world to really get your imagination going and following along.
Yep.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, before we go, let's tell everyone where they can go. You do have it right up here. I'm going to also put it down here at the bottom to go
Yep.
and go see your books, and of course tell everyone else, what platforms they can go to find you, things like that.
Sure. So that's my website, on the screen, geoffreywellsfiction.com. And on that website is information on every one of my books, links to Amazon, links to Goodreads, and also for people who don't want to buy from Amazon, where they can get it through Apple Books and other sources.
Hmm.
So all of that is there, and there's biographies. There's the school course that I teach is actually posted online as well, and then my blogs. So I'm also writing the follow-up to Nevertheless, which is those same two 12-year-olds. Now they're 22.
Wow.
They've gone through college and they're in their first jobs, and it's going to be another environmental thriller. So,
Amazing.
so there's some.
Follow, yeah, make sure to get your notifications on so that you can stay in the loop and get notified
Yep,
when new things come out.
yep,
Absolutely.
yep. Please follow me on my author page on Amazon, and you'll get notifications.
Perfect. Oh, it's so nice to get to know you and have you
You
on the
too.
show today. Wonderful topics. I'm excited for you to get these audibles out.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I'm
thank
gonna check
you.
these books out.
Thank you
Um,
for your encouragement.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Maybe that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
To lift each other up. Right. That's how we rise, by lifting others. I love that quote, and I think it's one of the best things ever to just bring people on, highlight everything that they bring, and wrap it in a nice little package and
Yeah. Well,
share
it's
it
been
with
a
the
pleasure,
world.
and I'm honored to
Thank
be on
you.
your show. I really am.
Thank you so, so much for your time today. And I can't wait to stay in touch and hear about new things that might be happening.
Me too. And if you send me the video file, I will post it out on social media, and I'll mention your blog name.
Oh, I
your
love that.
podcast name.
Thank you. I would love that. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Have a wonderful day and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
I'll have to cut